Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Conversations with Dr. Mary Boardman. This is Dr. Mary Boardman from Orion Psychotherapy and Energy Medicine. Mary's got a really interesting life, and she's sort of a pioneer in the area of sound medicine, and she's one of the more inspiring people that I've found anywhere. She's really a very interesting person, and that's really the reason we're doing this. So that you all can get to know Dr. Mary Boardman as well. So,
Thank you.
welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, what do we want to talk about today?
Well, I thought I'd tell a story. I think stories are powerful. And of course, it's all about how our story is part of a larger story, no matter how you look at it.
Mm-hmm.
But looking at our own story is sometimes the critical part. Because on some level, we always want to change our story. We want it to be better. We want to be better. Or sometimes we just want to shift it up, make it different. And so I'm asked a lot of times by my clients of, it actually centers around centering. And, we're on your beautiful property, and I'm aware of the breeze and the wind and the birds and just the absolute beauty of it. And just being in this moment and how blessed we are to be able to have this moment. And I know that a lot of people associate meditation with Buddhism, and that's very incorrect. Meditation has been a part of most religious and spiritual traditions since way back when. And it's all about being in the moment and having different ways of being in the moment. For me, I use sound to do that. When I am in monkey mind and I can't get out of it, I use two things. One is sound and one is poetry. But when I think about sound, I think of, I have a shelf that I use called my remembering shelf. And I have music and poetry on that shelf so that when I'm in monkey mind and I can't get out of it, I can use any of those resources and I know I can get out of monkey mind.
It works every time.
It works every time. And I recommend for people to start finding out what works for you. We have a whole new energy coming into the world now. What worked 2,000 years ago may not work now. We have different bodies than we had 2,000 years ago. So find what works for you. A lot of people who used to be able to sit in meditation can't do sitting meditation anymore. They have to do walking meditation or now driving meditation sometimes.
Driving meditation?
Yeah.
Isn't that dangerous?
Well, yes and no. One of the things that I learned how to do when I was at the Robert Monroe Institute in Faber, Virginia, was to live in more than one world at the same time. So for me, it became an inconvenience to have driving meditation happening when I'm driving, because I was always pulling over to write down what I got. And I never got anywhere because I was always pulled over trying to do trying to write down what I got. So what I did was I now have two voice recorders. I keep one on my nightstand at night to record my dreams, and the second one is in my car so that I can record what I'm getting as I'm driving down the road.
Smart.
Yeah. Of course, now they have smartphones. You can do that on your phone,
Right.
but I'm still old
They've
school.
even
I still
smarter
have
cars.
Yeah, I know. You probably talk to your car, now it'll record for you. It's crazy. Technology is amazing. It's leaps and bounds. So one of the stories I'd like to tell today is the story of the tar pit. Because I think it answers one of the questions of what is it we're really supposed to be doing? Emphasis on doing as opposed to being. Because right now, even though we're taping, there's a huge part of me that is just being. With you in your presence on this beautiful land, beautiful home, and just breathing in what is here.
It's a really nice day, too.
It's a gorgeous day.
That helps.
For September in New York, it's a blessing. folks in New York, you know what we're talking about.
Upstate New York.
Upstate New York, that's right.
It should be snowing any minute now.
I guess it is in the Midwest. Don't say that. So one of the stories is actually a parable. And it's the story of a being of light. And this being of light is walking along, and it comes to a tar pit. Now in this tar pit are a whole bunch of beings that are absolutely just covered with tar. They can't get out of it. It's like this sheath that's around them. They're stuck in it, it's globbed on, they can't get free. So what this being of light does is goes down into the tar pit, walks through the tar pit, comes out the other side of the tar pit, tar free, and walks a little ways and turns around. And pretty soon over here is one person that stands up and sheds the tar. Over here is another person that stands up and sheds the tar. And over here is another person that stands up and sheds their tar. How does that happen? What did this being do? Essentially, all that being did was hold its own light. And when I say that's all it did, that's huge. Staying in our light, staying in the remembering. I like to think of it as one of my spiritual teachers said, we do this dance of remembering and forgetting, remembering and forgetting, remembering, forgetting. So what this being did was to hold the remembering of the light of who they truly are. And that's a high vibration. That's a love vibration. That's really up there. And so if someone is ready to shed their tar, they will resonate with that vibration and stand up and shed their tar. If they're not ready, if there's too much of a gap in the vibration, then it won't happen.
Right.
So your job, my job, any of our jobs is to hold our own vibration of love and compassion. Now, as I said before, the ways that I do that are sound and poetry. And I wasn't into poetry until probably 1998. And I brought my mother to live with me. This is after I had the retreat center built. I met a woman who became my business partner, and she did poetry with the poet David White. She actually did voice training with David White, an amazing poet. If none of you are aware of David White in Washington, I get to know him. He's amazing. And she turned me on to poetry. And so when I was caring for my mother who had Alzheimer's disease and colon cancer, I wasn't free to do a lot, but I could listen to music and read poetry. So for my doctoral thesis, what I did was I read 30 books of poetry, and I culled out the 298 poems that kept me the most centered in my light. Because I learned early on that if I'm not in a good mood, my mother's not having a good day. Because she would resonate to whatever my energy was. And I had an elder care and hospice ministry every winter in Florida, and actually tried this out a couple of times. Of just, if I was in a bad mood, I wouldn't try to get out of it. Oh my Lord. All the elders would like resonate to that, and we would have the worst dinners in the world. So we learned very early on, no matter what our mood was, we better raise our vibration if we want them to resonate to a higher vibration. And so whether we felt it or not, we soon learned to feel it and to change. And whether that took music or poetry for me to get out of my quagmire, to do that. So when I talk about holding your light, it's finding ways that each one of us in our own unique vibration can be the most loving. Because when I was that with my mother or with the other elders, then they responded to that. They resonated with that vibration. And it's all about vibration and frequencies and sound. It's all the same thing. And we entrain to everything around us. Right now, we're just really entraining to this whole beautiful day around us. If we were down stuck in the quagmire of a LA intersection, we wouldn't be in this same vibration.
Right.
I'm sure.
And you get that as you walk through a day. I mean, you get these,
Right.
you get other people's energy as well.
Right.
I think it's a great thought, but you can actually make your work better
Hmm.
just by being cognizant of this.
Yes.
And if you feel yourself really being in a negative space, that you can change that by, listening to one of your favorite songs, or doing 5 minutes of entrainment,
Hmm.
with any number of the products that are out there, that are available for the iPhone or Android phones, and you can actually change things. I used to have this. I used to tend bar and wait tables and do that kind of stuff, and I started to notice that when you were in a really good mood and you were working with a crew that was in a good mood, you guys made tons of money.
Yeah.
Those nights were always our best nights.
Yeah.
And I started to do it on purpose. And if someone came in and they were in a really foul mood, I'd say, look, we have to either change your mood or you have to go home,
Hmm.
because I was saving up to go travel through Europe, and every dollar mattered. So I really wanted to make as
Yeah.
much money as I could anytime I was going to be there, and it worked really well. Actually, one night we did send somebody home because he wasn't getting in a better mood, and he was, we actually, we made him be the bar back for a while,
Hmm.
and he said, "Well, I don't feel like doing this." And I said, "Well, then you just go.
Just go home.
We'll handle this.
Exactly.
You don't want to be here anyway,
Hmm.
right? Let us handle it." And we ended up doing pretty well, and I used to do pretty well, just because I would change that. You change that energy, and you get what you radiate.
Exactly. Exactly.
People bring it back to you.
Hmm.
And I spent a lot of years in sales and used it. You could be going into a meeting with a person who is known to be difficult. No one has a good experience with them, but I would go into those meetings with a different mindset.
Mhm.
I would go in there with a mindset more of love and service rather than how can we make this sale.
Hmm.
And very interestingly, something would happen and I'd resonate with that person, and we'd actually have a personal connection, and we'd do a lot more business than we otherwise would have.
Hmm.
I found that really interesting, and it's kind of interesting to hear
Hmm.
this, the story that you're telling, because it seems to work that way.
It does work that way, and you can also do things like called setting the room. Setting the room is when you're going into a meeting, and you know it's going to be difficult, or your perception is that it's going to be difficult, that you spend time and you meditate on the people that are going to be there, and you meditate on the room itself, and you bring the highest love energy and compassion energy into that room and into each person, and you make that connection with them before the meeting even begins. Before you even step foot out of your office to go to the meeting, you've set the room and you've set the experience. And more often than not, that's exactly what will happen,
Right.
because you have set the tone.
Right.
Because the love energy doesn't know time and space. That's why all this experimentation goes on about that they have people who can do something on one side of the world and they register it on the other side of the world in these experiments.
Right.
And it's instantaneous, because love doesn't know time and space. It doesn't know that at all.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's when you get that, I mean, it's hard for the mind to get itself around that.
Right.
How something can be instantaneous when it's thousands of miles apart. And yet it's true.
Well, that was the whole concept of collective consciousness. Isn't
Sure.
it?
Yeah.
Who is it? I don't have the name on the tip of my tongue. I know that
Carl Jung?
there are folks doing studies in intention,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a gentleman who had people meditating on water, vials of water,
Etsumoto.
and by putting an intention into that water through meditation, and then he would freeze those and look at them under electron micrograph.
Mm-hmm.
They had different structures,
Right.
and it was repeatable.
Yes.
So when you meditated the intention of love on the water, it would change,
Mm-hmm.
and almost always be the same, very beautiful snowflake sort of structure.
Mm-hmm.
And if you intended hate, you would get these very disjunct, fractured-looking
Yeah.
structures. And I just find the whole concept really interesting that you're actually changing through vibration. You're
Mhm.
changing the world around you.
Exactly. Exactly. Emoto's work is amazing, and I just saw a study where they took yogurt and put probes in it, and they took a group of people and they had it. Of course, there's live culture, live bacteria
Right.
in yogurt. And so what they did was they wanted to see what the difference in response was to whether people hated the yogurt or people loved the yogurt. And they got very wildly different results in the probes because the organisms would pick up the emotion that was aimed at it.
So would they grow more, or what?
They
what was
just
happening to it?
they just sensed it
Interesting.
because they're living beings.
Mm-hmm.
They're living beings. And the question, of course, is, I'm going to go out on a limb here. The question is, then what does the water do? And
What does the water do after the fact, or when it goes into you? Say you've got a Brita water filter or something sitting on your countertop or in your refrigerator. If you meditate on that and intend love into that water, is that going to be helpful for you because that water
because
has a
it's made
different
with love.
vibration?
Yeah.
The Chinese medicine posits that if you make love with the intention of food with the intention of love as you're making it, that food is more helpful. We have a mutual friend, Susanna Yelovechki, who is a master acupuncturist.
She's amazing.
She's studied long and hard, and she uses aromatherapy. She's a master in all of this, literally a master. She's far and away beyond 90% of the folks who are practicing acupuncture in this part of the country. And she says this all the time. She says food is medicine. She said
Exactly.
food has a vibration. Good, healthy food has a certain vibration, which I guess relates directly back to what you're talking about with sound and holding your light. That if you're eating healthy food, you are more healthy because of the vibration of that food. And I find it that these conversations always seem to roll together,
Yes.
and it seems like a very coherent theory to me. Without actually going out on a limb, you're taking things that you know to be true, and seeing that actually they apply in other places. It's not. There's nothing airy-fairy about this. This is sort of taking science in a different direction than it's been taken before. And as we move forward, you said NASA has done these tests with the vibrations of different things. Whoever ever thought that your organs had different vibrations,
Right.
and that the therapy that you do for people actually can help reset those organs to the vibration they need to be if they're not there.
Right.
And that's what restores health and makes people feel better when they come out of the sessions with you. It's all very interesting.
And one of the questions that rarely gets asked, but I'm going to toss it out there for viewers to think about, is that what makes the water change besides vibration? And isn't that consciousness?
Consciousness in water.
Water is consciousness.
The water is consciousness.
Spirit says that even the clouds have consciousness. The rocks have consciousness. Just because the rocks breathe once every 10,000 years and we don't see it doesn't mean it's not a sentient being. And so when you think about that, of course the mind isn't going to get it.
Right.
The mind was never ever supposed to understand matters of the heart and matters of the soul. Hammers are great for hammering, but they're not very good screwdrivers. Who would want to drill a screw in with a hammer? You don't think about doing that. And yet we would take this whole wonderful world and say, well, if the mind doesn't get it, then it can't be true.
Right.
And yet,
Which is where we are with science right now.
well, and I think we needed the scientific revolution. I think we needed it. I think we needed to swing into the scientific revolution for the technology. But now it's time to put some ethics and morality to it. It's time to realize that it has limitations. And just because science is in the kindergarten with making instruments to detect subtle energies and energy fields, doesn't mean they don't exist.
Actually, it's not. There are different ways of looking at things with science. If you look at a deconstructive view like Newtonian physics, where you're breaking things down to smaller and smaller pieces, that's one way to do it, right? But then there's a quantum physics way of looking at things,
Right.
where you're looking at a bigger picture and the effect that each piece has on everything else. It's a different mindset, and this is probably coming across as pseudoscience at this point. Um, but if you look into it, there are people who are actually looking at science differently now, and not saying
Right.
it's either science or philosophy. It's rolling together. We're finding with the advent of quantum physics that they're finding. If you look at the works by Dr. Michio Kaku, who's working on 11th dimension, things like this. It's really interesting how things can exist in two places at once. How your intention can change where a particle is.
Right.
And I'm finding that as they're digging more deeply into that, they're finding that some of the things that they thought were one way are not that way at all. And sometimes they are still confounded by what we can't understand yet.
Right.
But things seem to be moving very quickly, especially in the world of consciousness, and people are doing lots of research into what consciousness is and how we can affect it and how the brain works. Brain science itself is moving by leaps and bounds right now.
Oh yeah, yeah. It used to be,
It's
what,
changing.
just even 30 years ago, the mind-body connection was laughed at. The placebo effect was negated or laughed at or not considered real, and now placebo effect is known, and its intention.
Right.
And so, I can't wait to see where we are 30 years from now. I intend to be around.
I hope you're around. I hope you're still doing this work.
I will be. Not this work, because I'm in kindergarten right now too, compared to 30 years from now.
So to sum up, you can be an inspiration, or you can be what by holding your own light. What?
An example to others.
And how do you do that? How do you hold your own light?
And that's the question. And I think each one of us has to find that answer within. Is it by doing walking meditation? For me, it's sound. It's poetry. The Latin root word for inspire means to sing. So what makes your heart sing? Find what makes your heart sing, what makes your being sing, and do it. Because that's what holding your light is. Whatever makes you the most loving, compassionate being, that higher vibration that can raise people up if they're ready, and not judge them. There's no judgment. That being didn't turn around and say, "Ooh, you're in the tar pit." It didn't. It just turned around and noticed that, oh, here's a couple of beings that were ready to shed their light. So find what works for you. There's so much out there now with the internet and everything that it's just, wow. If you can't find it, then you're not looking. You're not looking.
Well, thanks for spending some more time with us.
Thanks. Thank
This
you,
has
Dave.
been Dave Astorino with Dr. Mary Boardman of Orion Psychotherapy and Sound Medicine. And we'll be back again, probably in a slightly different location, as lovely as this is. Thanks for joining us. See
Thank
you again
you.
soon.
I love these conversations, and you never know where they're going to go.